Good afternoon, everybody. What a great turnout. I hope everyone's enjoying today's events. And welcome to this session titled Global FinTech Landscape. For the next 25 minutes, our panelists, who I will now introduce. Kurt Rosen, can you just once I've introduced you, if you could all just give a little overview of who you are?
Okay, I'm Kurt Rosen. I'm from the Digital Isle of Man, and I'm Head of Innovation.
Rosalind?
So I'm the Head of Innovation for the Financial Services Authority.
Mr. Billinghurst, Steve Billinghurst.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a regulatory consultant with a bit of a penchant for digital and therefore fintech. I love the way you laugh then, Lyle.
That's enough. And Kyle Brits.
Hi there, my name is Kyle Brits, and I am the Head of FinTech and Virtual Assets at Sincera Digital.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, for the next 25 minutes, our panellists are going to discuss and give their views, what they believe are the key themes in the fintech global landscape and how these will affect the Isle of Man and its offering. But before we start, just to let you know, as if you've been here for a while, you know we're using Slido. Please be brave and put questions forward. We will either answer those questions going through the session, or if not enough time, we'll try and pick up at the end. The panellists are kindly going to be circulating afterwards, so if there's anything else that's not being addressed or you want to ask, please do approach us as well. So, first of all, what is FinTech? Kurt?
There's a very open question there. So, the glib answer would be it's financial technology. And that is kind of important to us on the Isle of Man. Particularly because we've got a strong digital community, we've got a strong tech community, we have a strong financial services community. So something that puts those two things together, you think we should be good at. And that's what we kind of need to project going forward. But it can be lots of things to lots of people. These terms are overused sometimes. And it can range from something as simple as an app to something that completely deconstructs the way that a particular financial element or instrument would work, and does it in a smarter way. And I suppose the last thing I'd say is there are kind of two avenues that this comes from. One of them is transformational. So those are tools of fintech being used by incumbents, people who are already doing financial transactions. And then there are the people who come from outside, normally tech companies, that will create challenging fintech items to those incumbent providers. And they come with technology and largely customers to that table. Whereas obviously the incumbents come with a lot of history and transactional things and look to make themselves more efficient. So we kind of have to think in our heads about those two different angles. One that says these are people who are new to the market but have technology, as opposed to people who are already in the market who are using new tool sets to make themselves more efficient or to deal with customers in a different way.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make any comment? Or
I'm going to make it look like this is a really joined up presentation of the whole day and refer back to Jason, actually, because Jason spoke about the power of the computer that we carry around in our pocket every day, and it's and the cost of computing that has gone down and down and down, and the access that the mobile technology gives us, and the data that we continually deliver by transaction and by action on that phone. When you put those three things together, fintech actually is it's in our daily lives constantly, and I don't think we probably realize just how much it's there. And so I don't think there's anything that we can get away from now in terms of the full delivery of financial services through that little computer that we carry around that has huge computing power means that we'll never get away from it. And so the fact that it's on the agenda, the fact that it's further up the agenda this year, Digital Isle of Man, I think is really positive steps. It's the question of how do we capture it and how do we make it work on the island, and how do we make it contribute to the economy on the island?
Okay, thanks very much for that. One of the other things that we're going to be doing today is to introduce the Innovation Hub and how it works and how it supports business growth. Now, Ros, I know you've been very involved with this, representing from the FSA. Can you just explain to us exactly what the benefit is and why we're doing this?
So I think obviously our regulatory sandbox was formalised about 12, 18 months ago, which is a really superb avenue for firms who sit within our perimeter, who we need to bring through to full regulation and remove conditions on their licence as they work through the process. But we clearly felt there was a gap before that where people didn't know if they fitted in. They might fit in. They've got something incredibly new and innovative that we've never seen before. And it's a safe space which works with Finance Digital and ourselves. And we have it as an opportunity for people to come and approach us, to engage, to understand exactly where they might sit in, to have just have early discussions and dialogue. And we have been working on this, I think, for 2 years, basically on and off, trying to bring this to fruition. Yep. And now it's seen as obviously we're announcing it today as a formalisation. It'll be public very soon. But yeah, that's sort of what it's aimed at doing. Is it's like an incubator for people. And some of these people may never actually go into regulation, but there might be sufficient critical mass where we then say, well, actually, we see as a jurisdiction, we may need to sort of alter regulation or bring in new regulation, which, as we know, as a regulator, we're not in control of most of the time. But the point is, at least we're having the conversation and we're alert to what the opportunities are and clearly considering the risks.
Okay, Kurt?
And I think just to add to that, there's one of the points in there is this is a coordination between two of the agencies, Finance and Digital Agency and the FSA. So it's one of those good examples of us coordinating and putting these things together. We're talking to each other about what's happening. So nothing comes as a surprise. And we're also able to represent our different perspectives. So the Finance and the Digital Agency have an outward perspective looking at bringing business into the island. Quite rightly, the regulators have a perspective of protecting the jurisdiction. So sometimes you have to have very grown-up conversations about how something fits into that and whether it can be accommodated here and what the middle ground might be. So it's extremely positive, or I'd take it as extremely positive, that inside government we're having those conversations rather than letting things drop off a cliff.
Okay, thanks. Quite a few Slido questions, but I've got another question here that I think that might answer some of them, so we could just move on to this. This is to all the panel. I'd be interested in hearing each of your input on this. So what do you think are the most significant current global fintech trends? Who wants? You go.
Great. Well, there's a few. My main focus sits around virtual assets. So that's kind of the most what I read and what I pay attention to. But I can tell you that at this stage in time, over the last probably a few years, but this year in particular, there's been a really big shift towards stablecoins and towards central bank digital currencies. So what that means from our perspective is that those two items are largely used to facilitate payments. Like if we're dealing with stablecoins by themselves, they're a means of countering the volatility within a crypto market. So instead of paying with an asset that can fluctuate in value, we have something that is tied or linked to USDT. Now, that's significant because what it's telling us is the banking system or the traditional finance system is kind of broadening out. So we're looking for different means of facilitating different business across different industries. So that's me is a significant point. And thinking about the island and the gaming industry and related on here, just the difficulty that you sometimes have with getting banking facilities or the likes, it's quite a significant point. The other one, the CBDC side, is something that is rolling out very quickly by the looks of it. So central bank digital currencies, effectively, we have about 130 countries that are looking at rolling these out. We've got half of them are in pilot stage or late stage development mode. It is something that's coming. So that means that the traditional way that we look at fiat in the financial system or monetary policy even is likely to change. So it's one of those points we might not be able to implement here, but it's something that we'd have to keep in mind and consider going forward as we look toward a global scale.
Can I just ask you something else just to further on that question? One of the points one of the issues that's been raised in a couple of questions here is, have the IOM FSA or digital ever considered a future where Bitcoin is legal tender in Isle of Man? And what are the main consideration factors in this decision?
Well, no, but we are obviously heavily, we're we've been really closely looking at all the MiCA elements.
Yes.
To bring in more regulation to do with the sort of the providers. So for the last 2 years, we have been, closely monitoring what's going on in Europe. And clearly in the last, particularly probably 7 months since some scandals, it has just moved at a pace that, is just incredible. So I think in the new year, we'll be issuing a consultation paper to look at how we supervise particularly virtual assets on a go-forward basis. Clearly, at the moment, they are supervised by us for AML purposes only. But the considerations are asking people, and we'd appreciate your feedback. So it's sort of a call for action. How we should supervise them. Do we bring them into full regulation with have prudential conduct governance? Obviously, coming with that, there's infrastructure we'd need to implement to be able to achieve that. But we're asking for the island's views on this, and your views we'd like your views to be submitted. So we are watching this closely. And I suppose maybe just touching then on the, obviously, Moneyval being the backdrop of everyone's mind, we will also be issuing a consultation on the travel rule in the new year, which we have been collaborating with industry over the last while. I know Kurt's been at it, and I think, Kyle, you've also been on it. So this is effectively bringing in the wire transfer rules for crypto, where you have to have the beneficiary and the receiver names and things like that. So we'll be issuing a consultation paper on that again in January. So, lots of great reading after Christmas for you all. But we would appreciate your comments and feedback. So I guess the answer is for legal tender, no. But clearly we are looking at what's happening in world sort of horizon so that we can keep abreast of it and make sure we're not used with regulatory arbitrage and we keep up to speed with it.
Yeah. And just on that as well, with all the changes that you're facing and you're trying to support businesses in and developments, do you think regulation can keep a pace with the new technologies and business models?
I think it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
I think from a skills perspective, I think that is one of the areas. I mean, I think going back is what's FinTech. FinTech is currently used with every single organisation who we supervise, from very simple to very complicated. So we're very lucky and privileged. We get insights into a lot of big institutions. They ask us to come in. They show us their systems. So we learn on a regular basis. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI is a classic example as to how we as a jurisdiction regulate that. We're not putting our hands up, by the way, because that would be a significant amount of upskilling. But I think it is a challenge, and we do our best. And I think, it's a challenge we have where the skills matter on the island in total.
No, thank you. Just another question again, quite a lot on banking, as we normally get. They're talking here about, if we're talking about supporting more international business, how do we attract and support the banking institutions? And also they were looking at, particularly in relation to those that are challenged with gating relationships, particularly gambling and the gaming companies.
I think it's like, for us, it's a fine balance, right? We can't interfere too much. A lot of the bank, so let's talk about credit cards, the one branch, but like no banking down south except for Port Erin. So it's an acute problem. It's a really difficult challenge for us unless we impose requirements on these institutions whose headquarters are often elsewhere. So it is a real challenge for us as a jurisdiction, trying to attract new challenger banks, which I know is something Kurt and I have discussed, if there's any opportunity for that. But we have very little powers to force somebody to keep a branch open in Castletown, to force them to do credit cards. These are risk decisions and policy decisions. Unfortunately, they're taken far, far higher up. Obviously, we have our local incorporated banks, but it is a real challenge. And I don't think as a jurisdiction we're particularly onerous compared to if you're regulated by the PRA, which a number of these are. So, I think that's something that caused hurt.
I've just kind of going back to the previous question and then adding this one on. So if we look at things like stablecoin, we have a stablecoin here, a GBP denominated stablecoin. And you could, in talking about things like legal tender, you could look at that, but it's not quite that simple. We don't have a central bank here. Now that creates equal opportunities and risks that you have to kind of balance out about how you do it. You then take that whole FinTech argument forward. If you look at primarily or part of why FinTech emerged as its own kind of sector. It was a lot around the bank crashes back in 2009, where actually regulators said we need more competition here. Things need to happen so there isn't concentrated risk. Combine that with what we talked about with AI, about this opportunity to have access to compute, it became easier to build new things that just took a tiny slither of what was being done. So when you start deconstructing banks and other financial institutions, I'm going to try and say this word, but I might not get it right, this disintermediation that is talked about, then you actually, as you go forward, have to start questioning, well, what is a bank? What are the constitutional parts of that? When businesses talk about banks, quite a lot of them don't talk about depositing money or borrowing money. They're talking about payments. Payments now can be done in other ways. So whilst we haven't got to this point yet, those are the type of conversations that we have to have going forward. And that's why things like the Innovation Hub are really useful to try and pan those things out. But again, reaching out to the community in ways that Jason has, we kind of need some problems to be thrown in there. And I know that sounds like a very bad thing to say, but from the community, our community, saying, well, we already know about banking issues, credit card issues, those type of things, but actually presenting things up there that might represent a solid and stable alternative to those can be very interesting for us to look at and see what context we can wrap around it.
Okay, Kyle?
Just want to add on to that. That's one of the things that I brought up a few times before, and that is the difficulty that we have in getting banking for certain industries and certain types of activities that are undertaken. So, really positive idea and really, really useful to be able to use the Innovation Hub to do that. The only other thing that I wanted to add is the points in regulation. Now, regulation as it stands, especially in the crypto space, we had a few different means or a few different ways of doing it. One was effectively the states. They kind of decided not to regulate to a large degree. They would just leave it and hope that the problem would go away. The other one that we had were places like Estonia, where, they were really quick to be open to new business, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the point that I want to make is the speed of technology or the speed of change or adaptation of technology is immense. MiCA was put together with a gigantic team from the EU or the EC, and effectively before that paper was in proper draft, it was already outdated. So regardless of what they're doing at the moment, they seem to be stuck in this constant loop of catching up. And unfortunately, that's just the difficulty that the regulators are experiencing. It's not an ideal position, but we have to be mindful that is kind of the way that's going to go for probably the next while. And it's not a unique problem to the Isle of Man or any other small jurisdiction.
Okay, Steve, you looked like you were saying something.
I think the one aspect that really is quite important in this is kind of the international aspect of it and the borderless aspect of FinTech. And I think what, I'm sure I've had a decent conversation with Roz, and we've challenged each other a lot in the past. But the one thing that obviously is really difficult for the FSA is to actually maintain a regulatory perimeter that works for the industry and works for the island, but at the same time is open and alert to just the broader borderless issues. Talking over lunch about sort of, Class 8 payment providers who are providing banking solutions or payment solutions to a number of businesses that aren't on the island because they don't need to be on the island. And then there's a question of just how much, there is a mosaic of regulatory frameworks that the FSA has to be aware of, that the FCA is doing in the UK, that the CBI is doing, that Jersey and Guernsey might be doing, that all actually have an impact on the way that financial services are delivered and accessed on the Isle of Man. So the picture unfortunately just ends up being more and more complex. I think the FSA and the industry have to work out where we want to go first and where we want to pick a battle rather than try and fight a war on every single front, because we're never going to win that.
Yeah, and I think going earlier, something Jason said resonated with me about the community getting behind something. So there's a reason they won't bank certain sectors and industries, because they view it as higher risk, right? That is it is really down to a commercial decision and a risk management decision. So as a community, obviously, so Moneyval is so important, us being successful at Moneyval, but also building relationships. And we're not some sort of tax haven off in the middle of the Irish Sea. We are actually a credible international financial service centre. And I think we've got to be a bit better at saying what we do well and how great we are and how well regulated we are to build a reputation. But to do that, it does require a lot of sort of international, lobbying, let's say.
Okay, thanks. Just another question as well. One of the key challenges we are faced with in the Isle of Man is to grow the economically active population. Does the fact that we're looking towards more automation within the tech side, is that causing us a conflict?
I don't think so. I think we spoke early on about it's not about replacement of individuals, it's about enhancement of individuals. These machines and the way we work with them, it will change. There may be at the margin a reduction, but to all intents and purposes, we are expecting higher productivity from the same workforce enhanced by the technology. And whatever that technology is, and the FinTech is a broad encapsulation of that technology, we should embrace it. It will change the way we deliver financial services. It will change the way we buy financial services. But it doesn't mean that we will reduce the level of financial services work we do on the island. We should, in fact, just do more of it because we work smarter, as well as rather than just working harder.
Okay.
And I think we also have to look at it from two perspectives. So if you're using something like AI within an organization as a tool, then productivity is kind of the aim of that, and therefore that can move people around or displace them. At the same time, someone has to produce those tools. Someone has to create them, which is a much higher level job. And part of what we should be attracting is those activities in as well, which means you're bringing in people to make the tools that other people will use. And that obviously increases to our count at a very high level. So we need to be doing both, really.
Okay.
And sorry, that's probably where the Innovation Hub actually has a big role to play, because the Innovation Hub could be there and turns around and actually encouraging those small test beds to come to the island and use the data that we have on the island through the Innovation Hub. And actually, once they're here and they've played with it and they've worked out that they can do something with it that is marketable beyond the borders of this island, they may be more intending to stay here and create a base here that then sells beyond this island. So I think we shouldn't put a downer on the Innovation Hub in the way that actually it could be part of a much broader business development regime than just potentially harming the financial services that are here because they're going to displace their business somewhere else. This is about actually growing our business beyond our borders.
And I think I'm going to add a plug for later on in the day here. Just confusing you with the use of the word innovation in every sentence that we have. We've got an innovation challenge that we'll be talking about later on. Now, a great purpose of that, amidst everything else we're doing, is to attract innovators to come here to do things. And some of those will be people who stick here. Some of those will be people that aren't. But that gives us a kind of worldwide attention to connecting into things that are tool sets that can help the Isle of Man. And that challenge was very successful at doing that last year. And we're making that bigger, but I won't spoil all of that. But that's an important part of the jigsaw puzzle, along with the Innovation Hub. Again, apologies for innovation again. That puts us on a world stage and actually says we want to do these things here, but we want to do them in a reasonable, rational and safe way.
Yeah, we've talked about how we attract fintechs to be here and how we connect them. Kyle, do you think there's a particular sweet spot in the fintech arena that we could be exceptional at as an island?
I think that's going to be a question to everyone, to be honest. But my view is that the focus shouldn't be on one specific industry or activity. We can do a lot of things well here. We're a small jurisdiction, which is fine. We're well placed between Europe and the UK, which is very useful. we have the opportunity to set up or to work with industry or between industry and the regulators and policymakers, whereby we can actually, take innovation forward. We can actually be at the forefront of certain types of innovation. I like the idea of the innovation hub. Excuse me, now I'm using it. I like the idea of it very much because it gives the opportunity for industry and for the people that are going to be driving these projects forward to have a voice within a forum that is useful. So they have a voice or a representative in that forum where we can look at how regulation or our current fit works as well as it possibly can for those businesses, not for tech, not for crypto, not for gaming, but as almost a foundation. Does that make sense?
So can we create things in an isolated basis, or do you think we need to be part of maybe a global ecosystem?
I think we should be part of a global ecosystem. The FSA is part of GFIN, certainly as one with the Global Financial Innovation Network. I don't think we've played a very big part in it so far. We have a bigger part that we could play in GFIN. We could do more. We could always do more, but we know that resources in the FSA are tight, to say the least. But yeah, we have a role to play internationally. The Innovation Challenge is part of that, but I think we've probably got a bigger role to play, and I hope we do so in the future.
Okay, thanks. I am conscious of time, so apologise. One of the big things that we were always concerned about when we talk about tech is how safe are we? How do we protect ourselves against cyber attacks? Is this significantly increasing, or is the protection also increasing at the same level?
I think protection never quite keeps up with the offensive part of this. I think we have some very good structures. We have some very good companies here. I think we've got an increasing awareness of this happening here. I think we can probably legislate a bit more around this as what local companies' obligations might be, but we have to think through all of that. But I don't think we're in a bad place, but we're certainly not protected from it. And AI, as with everything that AI touches, accelerates that potential problem. So we just got to keep up.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other concerns that we always have is the island's IT infrastructure really sufficient enough to be able to support the global fintech?
I would say yes. In terms of the capabilities we have here and the knowledge we have here, absolutely. We can always enhance that. We can always make it better. But we're if you look at base infrastructure, communications, all of those things, I'd say we're actually in a really good spot. I wouldn't have any concerns about us using those to their fullest extent.
Perfect. Thank you. We are out of time. Apologies. As I said, so thank you very much to our panel. We've only just touched on a number of topics. We are going to be circulating afterwards, so if anybody wants to come and chat, that would be absolutely great. But thank you very much to the panellists. Thank you for taking the time. Much appreciated.